So I'd now like to ask Lord Sheikh to please take the stage.
I'm not a scholar, I'm a businessman and I'm a politician. So to hear our scholarly friend here, I felt a little bit humbled, but I want to start off by saying that our MC, our brother here, did not use the word ISIL. I hate the word ISIL. The correct word for these people is Daesh. Because the people who are fighting in Syria and in Iraq, they are not Muslims. Because they have a distorted understanding of Islam. Because what they are doing is totally Islamic. Islam lays down clear directives, clear instructions, what people should do in state of warfare. Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, Khalifa Abu Bakr, clearly stated that you have to go to war. You have to, our scholar friend here referred to jihad. But he said that in a state of warfare, protect children, protect women, protect trees, allow the dead of the opposing party to be buried. Now those rules were made 1400 years ago. They have just been incorporated in the Geneva Convention. So what we want to do is explain what Islam is all about, not only in regard to jihad, in regard to what we should do when we're in a state of warfare, but generally because it is very, very important that we clear people's misunderstanding. Now, I was saying yesterday that when Salahuddin Ayyubi, when he conquered Jerusalem, he allowed all the people of Jerusalem to live there in peace. And similarly, when Khalifa Umar, when he went to Jerusalem, after the Muslim conquered Jerusalem, and we must bear in mind that Muslim conquered Jerusalem after the Christians took over Jerusalem and they slaughtered everybody. And Khalifa Umar said, everybody should be protected. Now, we heard earlier on what the word jihad means. And the fact that in Islam, there should be no compulsion. These people in Syria and Iraq, they are totally doing things which are wrong. They are taking women, they are forcibly converting these people into Islam, because Islam clearly states that there should be no compulsion in religion. Now, radicalization indeed is a problem. It's a problem. I was earlier on today, I was having lunch with the Tunisian ambassador. About 4,000 Tunisians have gone to Syria and Iraq, and of course you know what happened day before yesterday. Now, these people think it is what they are doing is right, but what they are doing is totally wrong. And what we need to do is clearly explain what Islam is all about. And our friend here, the scholar, we have a duty. We need to explain to these young people what Islam is all about. What is the meaning of these words, because they have a total misunderstanding, as I said earlier on. Now what do we do with the young? First thing is, we need to engage with the young people. So very, very important. Mosque, I think, should set up youth movements. We should include them in the decision-making process. The sermons, I believe, should be in English, and the sermon also must contain contents relating to issues which concern the young people. I think this is very, very important. I've been to certain mosques, and the young people are not made part of the process. We need to obviously maybe that have sports facilities. We need to perhaps have essay competition. We need to perhaps have awards for the young people so that we can recognize the achievement of the young. The other thing I want to talk about is education. Unfortunately, the performance of the Muslim children is not up to scratch. And I think it's important, the responsibility should lie with the parents as well. There should be more parental involvement. The minimum qualification in my family is a degree, because we pay a great deal of importance to education. So I think we need our parents to encourage our children to be educated, because education is obviously the key to success. Now, I know for a fact that the Bangladeshi community, the children of Bangladeshi community are doing better, because I've found that they, undoubtedly the parents, are encouraging the children to be educated. So I think we would like all the Muslims really to pay attention to education of the children. The other thing I think is very, very important is empowerment of women. And I feel that we need to educate our women. We need to give them every opportunity. And we are finding that the women, the Muslim women particularly, are to a certain extent inactive. Now, we need also to look at the question of training of imams. I think the imams should obviously use English wherever they can in their sermons. I am talking University of East London, where we are thinking about doing courses in training of imams, not necessarily connected with religion, but they must be taught how to communicate with the congregation. There's also a problem, unfortunately, with regard to grooming. Again, an issue which the Muslim community must look into. Unfortunately, there is this question of denial. All those things are giving us a very, very bad name. We also need to promote the successes of the Muslims. The Muslims, there are nearly 3 million Muslims in this country. Some of them have done very well in this country. I myself am a businessman. I provide employment. I pay taxes. I'm also in politics. But we need to promote the successes of the Muslims, because I don't think enough is being done. Now, we celebrated 100 years of First World War. I had an event in the House of Lords where we explained what the Muslims did during the First World War. There were over 400,000 Muslims fought in the First World War. In fact, the first non-white person to get the Victoria Cross was a Muslim. And also from North Africa, 350,000 Muslims from North Africa fought in the First World War. And we did have, there is our chap, our friend from the police. Where is he gone?
The army.
Yeah, no, the gentleman, he's gone, really.
Yes, he was here.
He was here earlier on.
Yes.
We need to also build good relationship with the army. We must also bear in mind that the army in this country is apolitical. We've had situations where we have criticized the army, but we need to bear in mind that the army in this country is non-political, and we must encourage also our youngsters to perhaps join the police force, to join the army. All right, we can encourage them to be doctors, we can encourage them to be chartered accountants, but obviously we need to become part of the community. We must play our part in the whole of the activities which are going on in this country. Just to give you some figures, there are nearly 3 million Muslims in the United Kingdom, 77,000 in Scotland, 4,000 Northern Ireland. Age profile, and this is very important. 1/3 of Muslims are under the age of 15. So the community is made up to a large extent of young people, and it's very, very important therefore that we engage with the young people, but we need to explain to them what Islam is all about. And the other thing I want to mention is that 75% of Muslims identify themselves as British. People ask me, who are you? My answer is, I'm a British Muslim. And Dr. Khurshid Ahmed was very much involved in this campaign to give people the idea about their identity. And therefore, we need to feel that we belong to this country. We can still keep our connection with India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, but this is our home. And I think this is very, very important. I mean, I can speak 7 languages and I can communicate with all the communities, but of course, we need our children to have that feeling that this is their home. So this is where I'd like to end. And thank you very much indeed for giving the opportunity. And obviously, we can have a Q&A session now.
You talk about youth radicalisation. What is the government doing as far as employment, social economical factors which impinge and affects young people? I think that that's the basis which we really need to look as a former youth worker. Services have been cut. So how do you go and approach those young people when you've taken professionals out who used to work with these young people? If you can answer that for me, I'll be grateful.
I think we must understand that when the Conservative Party came into power, we were facing financial crisis. And we had to take remedial action. And what we decided to do is to cut on our expenditure and to do more trade. Now, as far as the cuts are concerned, undoubtedly they are hurting. We have a situation where people were depending on welfare benefits. We have a situation where the father is out of work, the grandfather is out of work, the children are out of work. We had to get them into work. Now, obviously, certain areas have been curtailed, but we had cut down on expenditure. As far as the young is concerned, undoubtedly, we have created nearly 1.7 apprenticeships. We have created jobs to the extent of 1.5 million. What I would say is undoubtedly, apart from going into university, youngsters must think of perhaps getting some training, and obviously we need to build our manufacturing bases. I mean, in this country, the Conservative Party, in this part of the country, obviously, we are building an infrastructure. We have announced day before yesterday we are going to spend more money on motor vehicle industry, creating more jobs. But I think we need to make sure that our children are on the right track. If you look at the prison population, 14% of the prisoners are Muslims. I'm not talking about people who have been convicted of terrorism. I'm talking about youngsters who have been convicted of criminal offenses, drug dealing, credit card frauds, and it goes on. Now I'll tell you a personal story, and I'm not trying to show off. I have 3 cars. One of my cars is really upmarket car. And I parked the car in Bradford. My younger brother, and I have my own personalized number, SHE1. My younger brother was standing near the car and 2 young Muslims were passing by. One says to the other, I'm sure this man has got, I won't mention the name of the car, but it's a really upmarket car. He drives this because he's a drug dealer. You understand? And the other one says, don't touch the car, you'll get beaten up. Now the moral of the story is, they associate success with drug dealing. And I think we need to, this is very, very important, we need to get them educated. We want more parental control. The difficulty was that when the immigrants particularly, if you compare the Muslims with the Indians are doing very well at school. They're very, very successful. But you have an element of the parents who came here, started working in factories, foundries, and when these factories and foundries closed down, they started having takeaways, they started having driving taxis, and therefore the welfare and the well-being of the children has been ignored. Well, let's look at mosques as well. Let's look at mosque youngsters, because I talked about engagement with the young. We have a situation where there are about 1,200, 1,400 mosques.
We need some more questions.
Sorry?
We need more questions and interaction.
I beg your pardon. Yes, indeed. Well, then I would say to you, yes, sorry. I'll say to you, my answer is, really, we need our children to perform better, and we all have a responsibility in achieving this.
I would like to ask a question to my Lordship. He told us, indicated us regarding Islam, regarding jihad and education of the children and empowering women. I think he raised the 4 issues. Yes, we're all aware of it. It is very common issues. But I think I fail to understand the guidelines, how we can achieve that. It's very easy to say we need that, but how are we going to achieve it? And after being Muslim, I want to know what is the highest virtue in Islam after being a Muslim, from your Lordship.
Really, it's up to us, up to the community, and up to the families to achieve that. When regard to empowerment of women is concerned, we as parents have got to ensure that our daughters, our children are educated, and obviously make use of all the facilities which are available here. Now, I can't really, don't spend too much, but I'd like to say to you, this is a land of opportunity. My own family was expelled here. We came to this country with nothing. And I think that if you're prepared to work hard, but I think it's up to the community, up to the parents, really to achieve this. So that is briefly my answer.
The second part.
There are a number of narratives which mention different things, but all put together, I believe they have one theme. That after acquiring faith, the most significant thing for an individual is to have good morals. Got to be a morally upright person as a true believer.
There's a feeling within youngsters, there's an identity crisis. You touched upon the fact that our forefathers were involved in the war, in the First and Second World War. And this really actually makes youngsters feel equal to this society, and actually makes them engage from my experience. Do you think this should be made part of the curriculum? Because we weren't taught that at school.
I am building bridges, I'm building harmonious relationship with the armed forces. The armed forces now have a Muslim Association of the Armed Forces. We have had 2 group captains, we have had a vice admiral, we have had colonels. And I think it's important that we tell not only our children, but also the British community about the contributions of the Muslims who came here, who fought in Palestine, who fought in Turkey, on the Western Front. And as I said earlier, the first Victoria Cross was won by a Muslim soldier whose name is Fudat Khan. And I think it's important that that should be taught, and we are in fact in the process of doing so. It's important that not only our children, but the white community here also are made aware of the contributions of the Muslims during the First World War, and I think that's very, very important. And I think the point you raised, sir, is important.
Dr. Khalid, you were very eloquent in putting the argument, and really impressive coming up with all the details about how the Quranic verses do explain what is happening is wrong. My question to you, with all the resources that are available, the argument which is clear, why is it we failing to reach to young people? And why is it we still see young people who are coming from relatively affluent background, highly educated parents, highly educated young kids, are dodging all borders, taking risks, some of them teenage girls who probably would not dare travel to Scotland from London. Nevertheless, they're traveling, crossing so many countries to reach to a very bleak and very dark future, or none whatsoever. Why do you think that the argument is clear, the resources are there? Why do you think we are not reaching? Thank you.
I quite agree with you, and although what one of the earlier questioners mentioned that economic and social conditions do play a role, but they are not vital. I agree with you that there are some affluent people who are getting involved in it. A very simple answer is, you know as well as I know, that a religious Muslim has as his ultimate goal the achievement of the possibility of entering the paradise forever in the next life. There are religious people who have convinced them. How have they convinced them? Through a process of indoctrination. How did it come about? Because many people who are in charge of religious seminaries, many of them who are in charge of mosques, they deliver those lectures. I am nobody in the eyes of those youngsters. I am probably an agent of the Western power. They would not even listen to my arguments. They would say that this man is a hypocrite. Those people, they present to them the verses of the Quran and the Ahadith in Arabic so eloquently that it seems that God is speaking through their tongues. We need to do something desperately about it. And of course, this system of education is failed.
I think the other point is, of course, some of this is due to social media, basically, and communication on the computers and, of course, on the mobile phone. But there is also some glamour, they think. It's great. They think they are doing something for Islam, obviously, because all this misinformation which has been fed to them.
Thank you. My name's Sarah. I'm a local head teacher, not far from here. I have 700 children in my school. And I would like you to help me understand the role of love and forgiveness in Islam.
Well, it's something which actually dominates over everything else. There is a verse of the Quran that وَرَحْمَتِي وَسِعَتْ كُلَّ شَيْءٍ. My mercy, it encompasses everything else. You know, the difficulty is, when you have a text which was meant to guide the people whom it was addressing immediately, and it also had verses which was guiding the entire humanity, you need to first intelligently read that text. And when I say intelligently, I am not suggesting something which is foreign to the text. The text itself is urging the reader to ponder and reflect upon the Quran. So that, you know, one of the things that has been taken away from the believer is his possibility of reading the text with an open mind. It's a challenge. I know for sure when you read as a first-time reader, you find certain difficulties, certain apparent contradictions. You tell your students, read the Quran carefully, try to remove those apparent contradictions, they're not real, and what you will find is a unified message which is consistent, and it's a message of love, certainly, because as I said, the Quran continues to mention that the love of the Almighty is something which dominates over everything else, and the very first verse of the Quran is Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. All praise and all thank are the prerogative, the right of the Almighty, for whom we are doing everything that we have. And this is something which runs through the text. So, you know, there are ways of doing it.
Dr. Khalid Zaheer, you know, there are so many translations of the Quran from Arabic into English and other languages. Which English translation will you recommend for a new Muslim, for a non-Muslim, or people who don't understand Arabic? Because there are so many differences in translations as well, and they also misguide a lot of people here as well. So which one do you recommend?
As I said in response to her question, that you just cannot escape the need to read the text intelligently. I would not respond to your question directly by mentioning a name. I have a few favorite translators, but I would say to every individual, pick the copy that is accessible, that you have been reading, but read it intelligently. A translation is not the equivalent of the real text. The translator does it hopefully with good intentions, but because he or she is a human, there are bound to be problems. So always have a pen or a pencil in your hand while reading the translation and raise your questions, put question marks, and continue to struggle to understand what the right message is, and contact and talk to various different scholars and arrive at the understanding which you are comfortable with as the one which is making more sense. And of course there are no shortcuts.
Well, I've learned a lot about some Quranic issues, which I find really interesting. Part of my degree was theology, so I'm really interested in theological issues, so I find that fascinating. Part of what I would take away is these kind of events have to be the start of something, not just a one-off. It's great to see a lot of people here today, but it would be great to see more of a mixture, more women, some younger people at these events. And it's a very sensitive subject, and you can hear in most people's tones of voice the anxiety and the angst and the fear maybe that people have, and people possibly feel a little bit afraid about asking certain questions because they are very sensitive. And actually when we feel afraid to ask questions, that's when dialogue ceases. So this has to be the start of something, and get more people involved if we can, however we can. I'm a head teacher, so get me involved with school. But I'm a head teacher of a school which is for all children. Most of my children are Muslim, but not all. So it's an issue for humanity, not just for Islam or for any other religion in particular.